I'm the planning analyst for the city of Bangor. Just want to thank everybody for being here today. This lecture series is part of our comprehensive plan for 20 our public outreach process. And today's lecture series subject is on affordable housing strategies. And we have Adam Causey here. He's the development and planning director for the town of Kittery, Maine. And I'm just going to give a short bio on Adam real quick, and I'll turn it over to him. So Adam leads long-range planning, zoning administration, site subdivision review, code enforcement, and tax assessing, along with staffing the housing and economic development committees. Prior to moving to Maine, Adam worked for various city governments in the Atlanta, Georgia metro area, focusing on economic development and downtown redevelopment. Adam is a graduate of both the University of Georgia and Georgia State University. He lives in downtown Biddeford, where he serves on the Downtown Development Commission and also manages a rental unit attached to his home. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Adam.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to share what we are doing in Kittery, a much smaller town, but we've been working really hard on housing policy, and hopefully some of this will be useful to hear. A lot of it, I'm sure you're doing in Bangor, and bring the resources you have to bear to make your community healthier and try to solve this problem that we all seem to have with housing. I do have a quick presentation, and this is a modified presentation that I also gave to the Urban Land Institute, which is a group that was helping us devise some strategies to attract people to come and build housing. So some of it I'm going to go through because I know I have maybe 15 minutes, and then there was maybe a question and answer period. But I'm going to try to share my screen and then do this presentation. Can everybody see? Is this? I hope everyone can see.
You're okay. Good.
I might do the full page here. Well, you know what? I think we get the gist here. You can just see the head of it. So again, I'm Adam Causey with the planning department here. Just real quick to introduce Kittery, if you don't know. We are the gateway to Maine. We're pretty much a suburb of Portsmouth, but we are in the Boston area, so we feel those pressures in terms of development because it's just an hour away. So we definitely see that in terms of the cost of people and the cost of goods, and our land prices are getting kind of crazy over the last few years. But we have these great neighborhoods and commercial nodes. The Kittery Side, which is the historic downtown, is known for the restaurants, and it's kind of a little seaside village scene there. And we just have a beautiful coastline. A lot of visitors come really throughout the year to just take in the beauty of being on the ocean and the river. But we are also very much a regional center of commerce. The Portsmouth Naval Shipyard is in Kittery. It is 8,000 workers strong, and there's one way in and one way off of that island, and they both go through Kittery. So you can imagine we nearly double the size of the community when the workers come, which is at least 5 days a week. And then we have the Route 1 outlet, Route 1 mall, the outlet malls. They've been in Kittery for 30 to 40 years, which is part of our housing strategy. So really briefly, we're about 10,000 people, so a small town, but our prices are big. In 2019 census, and I'm using those numbers because I don't really trust the 2020 numbers, but in 2019, our median home price is $317. That's really not accurate now. We have very, very low inventory, and the majority of our homes for sale right now are above 400, and when you get a $2 million waterfront home, that really skews the average, right? Our income was good. It's $78,000 as of 2019, but as a region, it's larger. We've got York to our north, and some other kind of wealthy enclaves. So that gets pushed up. And we have great owner occupancy in our homes. These pictures are the Foresight. We did some artwork on some barricades to flex out during the height of the pandemic. So we try to work with our community partners, including our businesses, to make it very vibrant. People still came, tried to distance, but we were very successful in not losing a lot of businesses during the pandemic. Goes to part of our assets, which are our leadership and our staff. We're all pulling in the same direction. There's a lot of agreement on the housing front on how to get new housing units. And we have great community partners that are working towards the same goal. We have sewer capacity, we have school system capacity, we have water capacity, we have all these things that say, yes, come and build housing here. It's just we have some other constraints that have been very difficult. We actually do have now natural gas because it's been expanded and you can get natural gas to your home or your business, which has been kind of popular for some of the new homes that have been built. And we have transit. We have a bus system that comes here through Portsmouth that serves the community, primarily shipyard workers, but now it's hourly service here. And so we have traditionally not had transit service. I know Bangor, maybe you have a better bus system, and but as you know, the state of Maine does not provide a lot of transit funding, so you're kind of on your own. But we partner with Coast, which is out of Portsmouth, and we're doing a pilot program here. But it's about getting people on the seacoast into the main places where they work, which is Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. So our issues in Kittery from a housing standpoint: lack of supply, pre-pandemic and continuing. We primarily have a single family housing stock, older housing, a lot of nonconformities. We had a lot of zoning districts that just prohibited housing at all. Like you couldn't do it. So that was a point where we could make some ground up. And then our high prices, primarily driven by the supply, but we have more of a traditional subdivision model. So if you're going to build, you have to have an acre and you have to build a traditional house in 70% of the area in Kittery. So we are working to fix our outdated zoning codes. We've done a lot of work on that. And then we just have a lot of shoreline, so that impacts housing generation as well. And then our connectivity, if you've been through Kittery, you've probably been through Kittery either on 95 or Route 1. So we have this huge transportation facilities that just cut through the town without that local connection. And I know you probably see the same thing in Bangor with 95 going through it. Quick income comparison: we compare very, very well to Portland in terms of income versus the state. But we're not right next to Portland. We're kind of about an hour south, but we have those Boston pressures. Rent comparison the same way. Our market rents compare really closely to Portland, but again, we don't have the population or the commercial activity, the jobs and stuff that Portland might do, in their core, but again, we're an hour away from Boston. So what do? We did a lot of research to look at our zoning code and how it can be updated. So along with that, we kind of modernized our code and did a recodification, kind of pulled it apart and reorganized it to make it a little easier to deal with. We created a housing committee. We sought out expertise. We have a workforce, there's a Seacoast Workforce Housing Coalition, and they did some design charrettes for us. We engaged with the Urban Land Institute with a separate planning process that is in line with the Department of Defense and the Naval Institution here. And then our affordable housing developers, which I'm sure you're familiar with, up there as well, Avesta Community Housing in Maine. We've been really dialed into Maine housing lately, asking a lot of questions because Maine housing has some money coming to it. So if you didn't know, call Maine Housing because they've got some projects or programs that they're standing up with some of the federal funds. And then we target our growth area to plan for the future. So we know we have areas that need protection. So we, instead of making everybody mad and going and changing the densities out in the more suburban areas, we said, okay, we've got areas that have access to utilities, so let's juice those areas. So I mentioned the mall. We updated the density in the mall corridor. This is the existing Route 1 mall corridor. It is terrible. It's big box stores and sea of parking. We are working on our owners right now to see what they can do, but really this is about showing it off to the rest of the world and saying the zoning's changed, bring your checkbooks to developers and buy these people out and revision this corridor. That hasn't happened yet, but we have tried to brace the community for that impact of doing density analysis, saying here's how many units you can get here, and we don't really care in the if it's rent, for sale, townhomes, condos, apartments, just you can do it here. Just flip the development pattern and build more of a mixed use kind of neighborhood to take advantage of just the scenic beauty and the fact that these are close in with utilities. So do some visioning. I'm sure you've got plenty of places where you can do visioning, and we've got way more. But we did another zoning update. We've got 90 acres that are right on 95 that are undeveloped. It's kind of crazy. It's a big piece of land. So we changed the zone in that, and almost immediately, it was a business park that was never going to be a business park. So we juiced it with density. We made some flexible changes to the dimensions, put it in play, and on the zoning side, and then boom, we get a 283 unit development, the biggest one to date in Kittery. The rest of the zone is going to be master planned soon here. But this is what we needed. This is supply. This is organic market rate supply. And we have a TIF there, so we did a credit enhancement agreement with them. So we're leveraging our economic development assets here to get something, and just proves that, when you do the right thing in zoning, you will get someone to take a bite. And these are starting to be built next month. We also have another site that we're doing the same thing with the zoning, and knock on wood, it'll also be fruitful. But this is a existing industrial site by our water district that owns this. The town doesn't own it, but we want more density, so we're making changes. And then we'll probably do some kind of mixed use thing here. This is half a mile from the shipyard, so this is an opportunity for a transit hub, for a transit stop, to do some creative stuff with this land, and maybe some ownership townhome lots and some multifamily. But I really want to get into and say that what we've done here, which is not a new concept, but I don't think a lot of communities in Maine have this, and I correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if Bangor's zoning code has this, but we wrote in inclusionary zoning requirements. So in certain zones right now, but we're expanding it to other zones, primarily along on the Mall Road corridor on Route 1, where we want to see this density. We have required that if you build more than 5 units, you must provide 10% of those of the total development units as affordable housing. It must be affordable to those making 80% area median income if it's a rental, or if it's a for sale product, up to 120% AMI. And I mentioned our median income earlier, right? Our income is good. So we wanted to create the widest berth possible for these affordable units to be created, and they'll be deed restricted. So a lot of these figures will kind of hit the market rate. So there is no excuse a developer can make and say, I can't make that work. Yes, you can, because we're juicing the density, and we're not telling you have to build to 40%. You can build to 80%, 120%. But if they do not build them, then they can provide $30,000 per unit in payment in lieu fees, which goes to our housing fund. We're fine with that too. Give us the money. Our housing reserve fund will make it up in other areas to provide affordable housing opportunities. This picture on this slide is the type of housing that's being built in Kittery right now. Unfortunately, it was before this inclusionary housing requirement went in. So these are the types of homes that we're seeing that could probably be built a little affordably, or they're going to give us 30 grand per unit and we'll go try it again somewhere else. But these homes right now are selling for $500,000. And I don't know about you, but this to me is not a $500,000 home, but that's what we're seeing right now. So we did some work on our code again, accessory dwelling units. I don't know if you can do those in Bangor, maybe you can, but we tweaked it a lot because it was very restrictive. So I think we doubled the size that you could build them, changed some location parameters where you can build a detached unit or an attached unit, not just like in your house or above a garage. And then we immediately saw a 50% jump in permits for ADUs. So that worked. We probably got to tweak it a little bit more because it's still restricted on what types of properties you can put them on, single family. So maybe we got some work where you could do it on a 2-family or a 3 or up to a 4 unit We're having that conversation now about by right zoning, about can you do a 4-unit on a single family lot? We're not there yet. There might be some areas in town where that's available, but not yet. We also are kicking off next month our accessory dwelling unit grant program, because I know not everybody can can raise the funds and just say, yeah, I'm going to go build an ADU. I mean, financing is a consideration. So we're going to do a grant program that came from our American Rescue Plan funds that we got from the federal government, and the lawyers have said this is okay. And our housing committee is going to run this program, but we're going to give 50 grand to 2 homeowners to build an ADU, but deed restrict it to affordable. We're still talking about what level of affordability those will be restricted. It'll probably be on the lower end because it's free $50,000. But there are some eligibility requirements, and we're excited about that program. We'll get the 2 units built, and then we'll probably expand it depending on how healthy the Housing Reserve Fund is. So the Housing Reserve Fund is created along with the Housing Committee. They are about idea generation and bringing up things that maybe we don't have here in town, and bringing up amongst the group, and then we float those to our planning board or town council depending on what type of program it is. They also have a role in reviewing developments that bring in affordable units via housing plan. And then they give us feedback on other ordinance proposals. Kittery, we don't have a housing authority. We wish we did, so that we would have another partner that could do that could actually build and manage housing. But we're a small town. We don't really have the capacity to do that. So we have to be creative in how we do it, and how we get idea generation and affordable developments going. So the reserve fund is very new, starting to get money. When the town sells certain properties, we will also put funds into that reserve fund for use on other programs. And the other programs we're thinking of supplementing, general assistance or supplementing weatherization, supplementing monies that can go to existing homeowners that we want to stay in the community so they don't leave. And then, so town-owned property, the town has acquired various properties via tax foreclosure. This is a process that is open to any town right now, as long as, because I think it's a statutory requirement in Maine that you pay your taxes, and if you don't, then the towns can acquire those properties for non-payment. You may have to tweak some ordinances here or there. I think ours were fine, according to our lawyer. So we have acquired, this picture is a house that's on about an acre, and we're doing a request for proposal process to bring in an affordable developer to build here. And the reason it will be successful is because we don't have to get money out of the land. We don't have to make a profit on this. So we're also getting grant funds because this is a brownfield site, because of some fuel spillage that had happened. We're going to get some funds, and then Maine Housing has some other grant funds. So again, call Maine Housing to lower the basis in this property so we get 100% units. But we think we can get 6 to 8 units out of this 1 acre property, and that will be such a huge win for this. But if you don't have a tax foreclosure process, or haven't looked through, if you generate a list, generate a list and say who is not paying their taxes, and see if they are developable properties, with the caveat that we are not acquiring properties where people live. We are not kicking people out of their homes. This was a vacant property, and we were surprised to learn that we have probably 8 to 10 vacant properties that have not paid their taxes. So there's a process, there's some due diligence you have to do, but this got us 3 or 4 properties in the last year, and either we'll sell them and put the money in the reserve fund, or we'll help develop them like this one. And otherwise, we're just engaging our partners. This is just an ongoing effort. You can't just change the zone and just sit back and wait for it. So we have some affordable housing partners here like Fairtide that we are helping create a community hub. They're going to build a new site with some housing, and they're going to build a resource hub to bring some other nonprofits in together. So where it's kind of a one-stop shop, because when people need help that are homeless, even if it's intermittent, right now in Kittery, they have to go to several places. They come to town hall to get general assistance help maybe, but then they have to go seek out all these other nonprofits. Well, our community partners here got this great idea together where they're going to create a community hub where you can go to get resources in terms of counseling, in terms of housing, in terms of food. And then the town, we will more than likely put our general assistance office into that facility also. So you're not filling out 4 different applications, you're going to one community resource, but getting the benefit of these funds that come either from the town or from these other partners or their resources. So that has been really kind of an eye-opening thing just late as we got everybody in a room with this housing committee. And I'm sure you see this too. It's not just about housing, it's other things. It's, linking people with jobs, substance abuse issues. So if leverage your partners, because it all leads back to housing or the lack of housing in some respects, but it's way bigger than that. So I know that was really quick, but I'll stop there.
Thank you, Adam. That was awesome. A lot of good information there. The town of Bangor has done a few of those things already, but there's room for. I will just start off with a few questions. One of my questions was, when did the town of Kittery start trying to do all these things? How long has it taken to implement all these different projects?
Well, they've, I think it really started in 2018. And there were some reorganizations here in town hall that happened. My position, we had a town planner position that was really about reviewing plans. But my position was created by the town manager to bring more of that strategic look. We never had a planning director here in Kittery. And it just so happened that I was looking to move to Maine. So that's where I don't know that there was really that focus on the affordable housing and on trying to get strategic redevelopments in certain areas before then. Or at least I don't know of those efforts. So I can only speak to what happened from 2018 forward. And then, which is my background, I think I have said this to death to everybody here, but I do have more of an economic development background, of a planning and economic development background. And from my work in the Atlanta area, we had a lot more local communities in Georgia have a lot more powers to do direct economic development than I think we have in Maine, or at least that we have in Kittery. They just never availed themselves of a lot of things you can do. But I'm a big advocate for direct economic development from a local standpoint, and have been telling anyone and everyone that I can in Maine that Maine needs to step it up a little bit in terms of what tools are available to local communities. So I have some opinions about that. And so that kind of, I think that has driven a lot of the development cycle here about just getting our assets out there and talking to property owners and saying, you could be doing this instead of that. But this is an ongoing effort. It took, it took over a year to get the zoning stuff done on Route 1. But we had some pushback on that. It was a little easier on that big parcel that's undeveloped next to the interstate, because they had played with the zone so many times and never gotten a bite in terms of real estate development. So they created this business park zone, and no one was going to build a business park. We're right next to Pease, the Pease redevelopment in Portsmouth, which is the old air base, and they have all this light industrial flex space that's just ready for people to come in, and we have a greenfield. It was never going to be a business park. So that zoning change took a little under a year. But as I've learned in Maine, there's a lot of engagement from residents, and we have a lot of committees. So it just takes a while to get through the committee process.
Yeah. One other question I had was, as far as inclusionary zoning, I know Portland did that, and I heard at a conference recently that they have had issues with developers just going like right under that unit maxed where they don't have to do the affordable units. And I was wondering how long that policy's been affecting Kittery, and if you've noticed anything like that there.
The policy's been in place for about 6 months, so we haven't seen that unit generation from that policy. We also, our housing committee meets tomorrow, and I think we're going to have a discussion about this and maybe a change of heart, because when we put the inclusionary zoning regs in the code, we did it on two zoning districts, and it was the ones that we really do want to see growth, that Route 1 corridor. But what we also know is that there's other areas that are, you can probably get quicker development opportunities. So we're missing out because not all zoning districts have the inclusionary zoning language. But that was done consciously. We said, let's do this iterative process and let's go zone by zone so we don't freak anybody out. Because when we did that with the Route 1 corridor, we paired it with some density changes and some dimensional changes. But the conversation I'll have tomorrow is, let's separate that and let's talk about maybe having that inclusionary requirement in every zone, so that even if someone goes and builds an 8-lot subdivision in the rural zone, they're going to have to make a decision. Either they're going to provide an affordable unit because of the 10% clause, or they're going to pay into the housing reserve fund, because we're going to miss opportunities, because the developer is going to follow the path of least resistance. And if they can get 10 acres out, where maybe there's not sewer, but they can get septic in and there's well water, then they're going to build 8 units. So I think we're going to end up putting that in play townwide. It's just the scale will depend on the zoning district. But we will have it by the end of this spring. We will have that inclusionary zoning, because it's already kind of in motion in a couple other zones. So there will be 4 of our kind of most dense zones will have that in there. And I know that there are some plans coming in those zones. And that's where the rubber will meet the road. So we'll hear from our development partners whether they can make that happen. But we did purposely did 2 things. We made the requirement for the housing kind of the highest level of that affordable band. So 80% for rental and 120% for sale. And that's kind of the guidelines that are on main housing. There's way different levels. You can go 60%, 40%, you can do 30%. You can put it wherever you want. But we wanted it to kind of hit that market so that the development community didn't have that excuse that, oh, well, we can't build it. And frankly, we've got other towns around us that do not have inclusionary zoning. So if I'm developer X and I see that in Kittery, I'm probably going to go look in, well, not Elliott, because they have kind of another constraint, but I'm going to go look in York. The land prices are higher, but I don't have to provide. And the second thing we did was our payment in lieu fee is very low, and we know that it's $30,000, which is we know that's not the value of a housing unit. Portland's payment in lieu fee, I think, is over $100,000, or it might be at 100,000. Maybe it's like at 110 or something. But again, we didn't want to set it too high to give developers an excuse to look elsewhere, to go build in the Berwicks or to go build in I don't know where, Wells, because Wells is doing some housing development. So if we put too much of a burden on the development side, they'll just go up to Wells, I guess, if they've got a site they can get. So, but we've been monitoring it, and we've been having conversations with the development community and with not just developers, but other groups like the Urban Land Institute, which are made up of architects, developers, real estate professionals. And we bounce these ideas off of them and say, does this make sense? Are we spinning our wheels? And we get pretty good feedback from them.
Cool. If anybody has a question, just feel free to raise your hands and I'll click on you. Ms. McCord, who has a question?
Yes, I'm Tom McCord. Do you find it's easier or more challenging to try to do this kind of affordable housing in a jurisdiction right next to another state, another, world, New Hampshire?
Yeah, I think it's been difficult just because we have, Kittery's a very old town, and it's a great community, and we have a lot of longtime residents, and we have a lot of longtime residents that do not ever want to be associated with Portsmouth, which is, directly across the river. And so we hear that all the time, that we don't want to be Portsmouth. We don't want to be Portsmouth. And they see some activity going on over there that they don't like, which is really just the downtown kind of, building taller buildings and condos and apartments. So but the reality is we are a suburb kind of Portsmouth, right? So we have the pressures of the housing prices in this region. But then we have kind of a vocal minority that says better not build like that. But we also have a development pattern where the zoning code has been changed. Zoning in terms of Kittery's been around since 1647, as a place. But the zoning has only been around in the last 50, 60 years. So and it's been changed. So you take a place in Kittery Forsyth, which has a dense development pattern, but in the 80s they changed the zoning so that everything is virtually non-conforming. So because of the reactions of what they were seeing across the river, they said, oh, let's change the dimensional requirements so you can't do that. So I think it's more challenging. There is still kind of a no growth again, vocal minority here that when anything over 2 stories comes in, you got to get the fanning couches out. That's why that it is, we do a lot of outreach ahead of time with our committees, with town council to try to get ahead of some of these things and talk it to death, frankly, so that we can go back and say, wait, 4 meetings ago, we were having the same conversation and everyone said, okay, yeah, this is what we want. So when town council actually has to adopt something, we have a lot of effort behind it. And then just
Sorry, I was
I'll
muted. Sorry.
I'll just speak as someone who's new to Maine. I've lived here full time now for 4 years, but I've been coming up here since about 2013. I have family that moved up here, and I follow them. I do think it's very difficult to build in Maine. Just the development process, and we've tried to tweak it where we can, but we have statutory requirements in state law that we can't, right? With the subdivision law and others, you have to do a certain way. And just coming from where I grew up, I was born and raised in Atlanta, and I've worked for places in Atlanta where I've had people scream at me and say, this is the hardest place to develop, but they get what they want and they build it. And then I move here and see the development process, and no, it's very easy to develop in Atlanta compared to developing in Maine. So the development process is longer here, which I think adds to that supply issue that we've seen. And then just with the weather and not being able to build year round in certain respects, that also constrains. So it's definitely been a learning experience. I think it's a great place to develop. We just have to pick and choose our areas about where we do it.
Does anybody else have any questions? Thing that we want to kind of get an idea of with this lecture series is, talking about these ideas in the context of our comprehensive plan. What kind of strategies people want to see the city pursue. And so if anybody has any thoughts on that, feel free to speak up.
I'll put a couple of plugs in just because this is kind of, I love community planning. I love the planning world, and I'm very fortunate to be able to do the work I do. And we've seen a lot of funding opportunities come from the federal government and the state, and I've been heartened by the conversations that I've had with some of the state leaders. And there is money coming through Maine Housing, so if you're not already engaged with Maine Housing, I would say go talk to them. There's funding coming from the state. I believe that will probably go through the state's economic development department in terms of small area planning. That could be helpful. I haven't seen the exact language about that, but I know there's some bills coming through the House. We were fortunate to get some time with the Speaker of the House and talk about the what do they call it? There was a housing commission that was formulated at the state level, and they looked at some strategies. If you haven't seen that document, it's a pretty good read. But what we found is what they were talking about is a lot of the stuff that we're doing here in Kittery with density, not only single family zoning, ADU generation, those kind of things. And apparently the state's serious about that and will put some money behind some of those efforts. But if I have an ear of anyone in Bangor, because you're a bigger community, you have a great downtown, you have maybe more resources than a town like Kittery, but there should be some changes to economic development in the state to allow local governments to create entities that help drive development and help do it in a way that really will drive the development cycle, but connected to what towns and cities want to do. And I know there are some entities that are created at the state level to do that, like some of the development authorities that were created to help with older military installations, for example, maybe like Brunswick or the Loring Air Force Base, I think was one. But having that development authority role at the local level would be so helpful. And this is coming from someone who ran development authorities in another state that drove that development cycle, but allowed you to do it your way. The community says, this is what we want. You have a development authority that says, we will try to make that happen. And there's some tax implications, and maybe that's scary to some of the leaders, but yeah, if I had a TED talk, that's what I would talk about, just helping drive that development strategy at the local level. So I'll stop there.
We have a question from Jamie Beck.
Hi, Adam. Thanks, Anya. Yeah, my name is Jamie Beck, and I'm president of a nonprofit here in Bangor, Dignity First, working on creating housing for people who are currently unhoused and finding it extremely hard to get funding, but also looking at Bangor. I don't know if you've been up here to take a look around. We've got a lot of abandoned properties, a lot of properties that are vacant, placarded. Can you first talk about how the city of Kittery kind of went through the process of really hammering down on those properties that are vacant and abandoned and are just sitting there, and how you were able to speed up the process of acquiring them for reuse or sell to other entities who are going to actually use it for housing or demolish to create new housing? And my second half is, that was my first question. My second comment, I guess, is Bangor. I grew up in Bangor. I went to school in Bangor, K-12, and came back to Bangor after being out of state for about 10 years. And Bangor now looks quite different than when I left, in that there are lots of more spread of businesses, but less businesses. Bangor Mall is a graveyard. There are lots of places around the area that have built up that were big open fields or woods when I was growing up, but other places that are dying because of internet shopping, essentially, but nothing's happening with them. And the last reports in Bangor Daily about how Bangor Mall is doing, it's high rates of rent into the Bangor Mall. The parking lot is atrocious. I would never want to have a business there, but that's on the owner of that property. But like what you were saying about varying the development and varying how land is used, can you talk a little bit more about how you kind of went through that process? Because it feels like it might be a good opportunity for Bangor to kind of repurpose some of these locations that used to be hot spots, but are now really not and are laying dormant.
Yeah. I'll start with the first your first question about the town acquired properties. So I'm trying to recall how this even got started. We were looking, I think it was during the budgeting process, and we were kind of looking at doing our budgets, and we our treasurer was there, and she had a list of people who weren't paying tax. I guess that was something we were looking at revenue and like, wow, who's not paying their taxes? How big is that number getting? And it wasn't a huge number, but it was a lot of little. The spreadsheet was pretty big, And we noticed there was a lot of homes. And so we just decided to map those homes and see, where are they? Who are these people and why aren't they paying? And we came up with we already had some people on a payment plan. So we were tracking these people with the payment plan because we want people to maintain, stay in their homes. But there was a list of properties. There were properties that we were not getting response when we sent those letters out for the payment plan. And so those are kind of red flags. So we created a separate list of, and then we went out and tried to put eyes on the property to see if anyone lived there, and they didn't. The property that we're going to the RFP, that was kind of a whole separate issue, but it was vacant. It was vacant because of code enforcement issues. He had started parking buses all along this land, and it's next to a pond, and he had they were really old buses, and so the buses were leaking fuel, leaking oil. So it was really more of a code enforcement issue. And we do have a good code enforcement staff that we keep up on our, so that's one thing, we stay on top of the code enforcement issues. And there are fines that can get pretty hefty that way, although we try not to do that because it involves, you have to go, in front of the judge, and that's nearly impossible now. In York County, they're not setting, you can't do in person in the court, and so it's such a backlog. So instead of just finding people to death, we try to find other ways to get them to conform to the code. But anyway, we use that list, we code enforcement, and then we found out they were vacant. Then we looked and saw, like, well, what are our remedies for people who just don't pay their taxes? And our town attorney at the time said, well, you can foreclose on them. There's a statutory process that if you don't pay your taxes, the town actually gets to put a lien, or the city, just by virtue of the law. But you may have to align some local ordinances. And I'm trying to remember, we had a technical issue with one of our local ordinances about the process, just because I don't think we had updated our ordinance, and maybe the state law had changed over time. So we did that. We made that change to align. There is a process that there's a time frame to cure that lien. The property owner has a right to cure that lien, to pay their taxes. And so there's a process, but we were finding that not to be the case. We said, all right. And it can be a long process. I think it's 18 months. So you have to kind of have patience. We have patience. And so now we acquire those. The second thing we did is, when we didn't get answers about, hey, please pay your taxes or have a payment plan, we sent a different letter and said, sign your property over to us now and we'll stop asking you for this money. And so that's a quicker way to get the property. That doesn't work if someone else, holds the title, if you have a mortgage or something, obviously. But if you own the property, then that works. So we got 2 properties that way. I would just look, go to the town, go to your attorney and see, does our process align with what state law allows? And then we also change our ordinances, or in our charter, if we have a town property that the town owns because it's town hall or it's a park or something, if we own that and try to dispose of it, we have to go to a referendum. But our charter says that if we acquire properties via tax foreclosure, we don't have to go to a referendum. We can just sell it. I mean, town council has to say, yeah, go sell it. So that's a much easier path. We don't have to put it on a ballot. We just go to town council and say, we got this property because of foreclosure. Do you want it or not? Is there some town reason? Do we want to park here, or does Public Works need it for something? Nope. Okay, so let's sell it. And then now we try to sell it, and we're going to try to sell it and get back the taxes owed, because we want to make the town whole, right? But on this acre property, maybe the taxes are $70,000. Well, that's a win for us. We'll get the taxes back, and then we get someone to build something we want. So it's a long answer to your question. On the second part about the mall, that's a deeper problem, because it sounds like you maybe, the mall, I'm sure it was great in its heyday. And listen, I'm from Atlanta. We have malls, and we have really, crappy malls too, that, the developer, the business community says, well, that mall, that was great in the 80s, but now we want to build a new mall, right? And it's right down the road, and everyone else goes to the new mall, and now your old mall looks like that. I mean, that's what we're dealing with here in the outlet malls. But not having, we don't have an economic development corporation here. We don't have development authority here. So you have to you can juice your zoning to try and entice someone else to come in and develop something better there. But I've been to the Bangor Mall. I have been to Bangor. I've been to the mall area, but it was on the way to Bar Harbor, and again, I'm from Atlanta, and you have a Chick-fil-A, so I stopped there to get Chick-fil-A. But unless you have, and I'm just a big believer in unless you have those tools locally to do development, and to play with the taxes, frankly. So if you have a TIF, then you have some leverage. And I know the state allows you to do a couple different TIFs, but that's a long process to create a TIF. And
we have a lot of tips. We have a lot of tips in Bangor. Yeah.
And you're constrained with how many you can have and what you can do with them and whatever that. But I'll get on my horse again and say we need development authorities in Maine that can do the bidding of a local town. Because my last job from here, I worked in essentially a warehouse district 6 miles from downtown Atlanta, but not in Atlanta, in another community. And those warehouses are now 6 to 7 story mixed use apartment and condos. We got a Whole Foods. We have walking trails. I'm saying we. It was the last community I worked for, but Chamblee, Georgia. They have townhomes. They have complete streets. They have just everything you could want in a small, compact little area that used to be these warehouses that had empty out. And we did it because we had a development authority that could do bond issuances and mess with the taxes on that particular property. And I don't know that you can do that in Maine. And right now you can't in Kittery. I know that. So I think there's a bigger conversation to have about how we want to see development in Maine. But if you have a local economic development corporation, at least they can go get maybe cheaper money and bring in a partner to do redevelopment in the traditional sense, but along with the TIFs. But you're probably going to have to change the zoning around the mall, and that's a whole other issue that's going to probably raise the hackles of some in the community. But it is not. Yeah, it's not easy, and I don't have all the answers in terms of that transitional housing or housing for the homeless, because we're seeing it here too, and we're only helping on the margins where we can get. We have a food pantry here, so we allowed for like a mini food pantry in our community center. I'm trying to remember what it's called, but it's kind of like a community fridge, so you can go there and you can get it, no questions asked. We have a food pantry down the street, but we've essentially given them space for free in our community center to allow to do that, because if you have it in one place, and not everyone can get there, and so we try to spread it out a little bit, but that's just again on the margins. And I don't know how our nonprofits here, Fairtide and others, do what they do, because they do the bulk of the work, and they're working with 8 units across a town of 10,000, right? Nowhere near the need, nowhere near the solutions we need. So, Jamie, I mean, more power to you if you're working in that realm. That is not easy.
Were you going to say anything, or?
Yeah, I just was gonna add to Jamie that we can have our development team, our economic development team, give you a call to talk a little bit more about our process for disposition, just to coordinate that with you so you understand how our process works. I'm not as well versed in it as they are, so I can have them give you a call. And in terms of the mall, that is a big bulk of the conversations that we're continue to have as we go through the comprehensive plan process about what does the community want to see out there. The zoning that's out there right now allows pretty much everything. But we're looking at different options as part of this planning process. I think you may have another question, Anya.
Yeah. Peg Olson, I'll let you talk now.
Hi, Peg Olson, and I have a very basic kind of question. You've thrown out an acronym or two, and I figured out most of them, but TIF. Explain what a TIF is, please.
Oh, yeah, the TIF. tax increment financing. So you, in Maine, you can create TIF districts that freeze the taxes on the existing state of the land, essentially. And then let's say you redevelop a piece of property, the increase in the taxes from that new development, because it's going to be worth more than the old development, goes into a separate fund, and you can use those monies to repay, to build infrastructure. You can do that in a couple of ways. You can either repay a developer for building a road or bringing in utilities, or the municipality can actually spend those funds on certain activities that are allowed in the TIF. So you have to create a whole program that says this is our TIF, and any new monies generated will be used for roads, bridges, water, sewer infrastructure, or other things, parks, public safety. I think there's a pretty long list of things you can do with it.
Right. It's pretty big. Yeah. If you Peg, if you pop me an email tomorrow, I can send you information about all of Bangor's TIFs, because we have a lot of them and they work very well for the city.
But you do have to create a program, and
Right.
there's some calculations there's some limitations. I guess we have one TIF district here in Kittery, and it's TIF number 3, because we used to have 3, but we abandoned 2 of them. And we'll probably reconstitute them at some other point, because the state allows you to do affordable housing TIFs that are more constrained and targeted towards housing generation, and the transportation TIF, which allows you to take that money and use it for transit. And so we're kind of kicking around that idea, but our first 2 TIFs were over the mall area. We've got roads, we've got utilities, and they weren't being utilized. And so we decided to take that tool away, because that helped our budgeting. There's a couple of different reasons to do that, but because there's budgeting implications and tax rate implications to a community that does TIFs as well.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I just wanted to kind of build on Jamie's question about the tax acquired properties. So just, for other people's information, the Bangor does do a lot to try and get vacant properties. There's some cases our hands are tied. And I do think, I could be wrong on this, but I think there's a state law about bank-owned properties, and it kind of makes it harder for cities. Do you have situations like that where you have bank-owned properties? Do you have any strategies for that?
Yeah, we do have some bank-owned properties, but those weren't the ones that were tax delinquent. They tend to pay their bill. They tend to pay the tax bill. But we have had to do code enforcement, and maybe we're just lucky, but we've had some properties actually come and cut the grass and secure the property. Some bank owned. We don't have a whole lot of bank owned here in town. What we found is we have a lot of property, like family owned properties, and one of the tax acquired properties, someone had died, and then someone else had died, and so the ultimate family member we found was in Wyoming, and they said, we don't want it, and we're not paying you the taxes. So that was an easy one. But we don't have a terrible amount, where I guess we're lucky. We don't have a whole lot of bank owned properties. We do have property owners that are owned by some conglomerate, out of state, one being our outlet malls, that don't like to talk to us right now, or don't want to talk about redevelopment because they're happy with status quo. And we've made quite a lot of overtures to try to have that conversation. And in that instance, now we're probably going to move forward with a bigger visioning for Route 1. And if they want to participate, then great. And if they don't, then okay. And we hope that our efforts will pay off with someone with a bigger checkbook that comes along and makes them an offer they can't refuse. I don't know if that's going to happen. We would like to talk to them and have a partnership and figure out what's the best future use of Route 1. But right now, that's not happening. So we do have some property owners that are just not going to talk to us and pay their bills. And they're also mad at us because they they asked for a tax abatement and they didn't get it. So that's probably why they're not talking to us.
Else have any questions? So I'm just gonna kind of go over things for our comprehensive plan real quick before we end. Just wanted to reiterate again that this lecture series is part of our comprehensive plan process. And I'm just gonna go over our public feedback site real quick. So I'm gonna share my screen. Oh, sorry. So if you go to Bangor's main page here and you scroll down, you can go to get email updates and then comprehensive plan updates and put your email address in and then do join. And we're sending out email updates every week for the lecture series with our new topics. And we'll be sending these out throughout the comprehensive plan process, which is or so. And then the other part to this is if you go up to departments and you go to either community and economic development or left here is Comprehensive Plan 2022. This is our website. And so you can do, you can take part in one of these forums here, or you can go to our vision board. We just have some guiding questions here on the left that might help get some thoughts rolling. It's pretty easy to just click here and submit a comment. And if we go back, our interactive map. All the purple dots are the old, the feedback from our economic development strategy. So we're hoping to get people to just kind of build on this and kind of use these guiding questions to talk about specific places in Bangor. And if you just drag one of these dots down and leave a comment, and we are really hoping to get feedback from everybody who lives in, works in, goes to school in Bangor, or even just shops in Bangor. So if you guys can share this with your friends, family, anybody really, we want to hear from everybody. So that's pretty much it. Next week's topic is going to be on downtown pedestrian spaces. So tune in next week. And I just want to say thank you, Adam. It was an awesome presentation. Thank you to everybody else who participated tonight.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on, and thanks for listening and learning about Kittery. And I hope to make it to Bangor very soon.
Great. Thank you so much.